Afternoon, everybody. I'm Tom Saluzzo with the Museum of the Great Wars, here with the great folks with Mother Road Media, out here today, live streaming from Kingman Army Airfield. Okay, it's not called Kingman Army Airfield anymore. Now it's called KIGM, or the Kingman Municipal Airport. But during World War II, it was known as the Kingman Army Airfield. Interestingly enough, a lot of folks move out here to Kingman and don't realize that all the cool things that happened out here. One of the neat things that happened is we trained 32,000 aerial gunners, most of which went on to crew B-17s during the war, although not all. I say that because based on just the few limited artifacts that we have, at least two guys I know of left here and ended up being on B-24s in the China-Burma India Theater. But we're not here to talk about the B-17 program so much. As World War II got started, there was this huge demand, and we realized we needed more pilots and more people and more personnel to do things. And this phenomenal lady named Jackie Cochran came up with the idea of the Women Airforce Service Pilots, or WASPs. And so that's actually the good connotation of a wasp. The other wasp is the annoying insect that just stings you for no apparent reason. So anyhow, they started writing different women. And in fact, any woman who had a pilot's license was sent a letter, handwritten, or hand-signed rather, by Jackie Cochran. Now, I don't know how many of these letters exist. I'm going to assume that, like, the National WASP Museum probably has a couple. There's probably one at the Smithsonian. And yes, the small, tiny little Museum of the Great Wars here in Kingman, Arizona has one of these letters. Now, this is a very, very cool letter. This is at the very beginning of the WASP program. And it's sent out, and it's like, hey, are you interested in doing this? Do you want to fly in the service of your country? And the gal who this letter was sent to was a lady named Isabel McCrae. Now, Isabel was born in 1919. She was a registered nurse, and she had earned her private pilot's license in 1936. So, very ambitious individual. We got these artifacts that are part of our museum from her granddaughter, Paulette. Now, to hear her talk about her grandmother, she was a very, very powerful presence. You knew she was in the room. And just based on the pictures of her and the way she carries herself, I have no doubt whatsoever that that's exactly the kind of gal she was. So, anyhow, fewer than 1,100 women during World War II would end up successfully completing WASP training and go into service with the military. Now, they were not considered active duty personnel. They were considered civilian personnel. After the war, this led to a few different things. Most notably, they were denied any sort of VA benefits until the 1980s. They were not even issued World War II victory medals. Now, we see a lot of photos of about the same 6 or 8 WASPs. And these were the initial gals who went through the training, and they were the ones who were almost the marketing face of the program. And we see them flying B-17s, B-24s, B-29s, different aircraft like that all over the country. And she was actually able to fly active duty with the WASP for about 8 months. She spent most of her time towing targets, doing maintenance flights, things like that. However, one of the other neat things she got to do is go through the B-26 co-pilot program, which actually happened here at Kingman Army Airfield. So we're going to go over some of her artifacts today, and we're going to actually talk about some of the artifacts that we have that happened here at Kingman Army Airfield. And one of the things I say, the first thing we have here is her letter, which is a super cool letter. It's signed by Jackie Cochran to her, and it's just saying, hey, are you interested in being a WASP? One of the other neat things that we have, and we'll come down here, since we're going to kind of jump around a little bit. We're not really necessarily taking this in chronological order. But down here in the lower left corner, we actually have her flight records from Kingman Army Airfield while she was here for the B-26 co-pilot program. Along with that, we have things like her phone bill from Kingman Army Airfield. Interestingly enough, a phone call that lasted 7 minutes to Phoenix in 1944 cost $4.37. So when you think about the fact that a buck private was making $50 a month, the fact that these ladies were being paid $3,600 a year to fly an airplane, yeah, that's pretty expensive. That reminds me of like roaming charges back in the 80s with your cell phone, you know. It's like, oh, don't call me, I'm roaming. You know, it's like going to cost me like $1. So one of the other things we have that's one of the neatest things that you'll ever see, she kept everything. And I applaud somebody of her generation, of her stature, and doing what she was doing, saving all this, because she knew this was going to be neat stuff at some point in the future that people like myself and other military historians and other folks would nerd out over this kind of paperwork. She actually got in trouble while she was here in Kingman, and she had a citation for not having her tags visible on her car that were issued by the Provost Marshal here at Kingman Army Airfield. So apparently she didn't play by the rules or didn't pay attention or chose not to, would probably be my guess. So anyhow, we have a couple of wonderful photos of her from Avenger Field taken with in front of a BT-13, an AT-6, and I've also got another photo of her with a BT-13 and a Stearman in another book. Like I say, some amazing different things here. Down here, like I say, later they're going to zoom in so you can kind of see some of this. We actually have her pay stub from Kingman Army Airfield. And then down here we have the Fifinella. Now, Fifinella is the female gremlin, and this was designed by Walt Disney for the WASPs. Disney, Warner Brothers, all these different companies decided they wanted to do things to help the war effort. And one of the things they lent to the war effort was their artists. And so you'll see all sorts of squadron insignia that they've designed, things like that. And like I say, right here we have the Order of the Fifinella. We have this, and this is one of the original ones from World War II. This is not a reproduction. Here we have a wonderful photo of Isabel in uniform, most likely taken at Avenger Field. It certainly wasn't taken in Kingman because there's actually leaves on the trees, and we know that those don't exist around here. So one of the couple other things I want to talk about, and then we'll talk a little bit about her time as a WASP with this sort of as a backdrop. We actually have the graduation book. And what's really neat when you see a book like this is her class had, I believe, somewhere between 60 and 70 women who successfully completed flight training. And you see a book like this, there was maybe 150, 200 copies total made. So for any one of them to have survived is amazing. And when we open it up, it does have her name on the inside. And what is awesome is she went through it and conveniently for us, 80 years after the fact, wrote me by all the pictures of her. So we can go through it and identify them. Some of the other things of hers that we actually have her flight computer. Now, anybody who's familiar with aviation is familiar with the E6B flight computer. This is actually the model before that. This is the AN 5835-1, AN standing for Army Navy. And this was her flight computer. This was the device that she used to compute crosswinds and navigational type things as she was flying around the country from point A to point B. So this actually rode with her through her time as a WASP and after the war when she continued flying as a civilian pilot doing different types of things. So she was in, like I said, she was in class 44W3. She graduated in April of 1944, and she was assigned to various bases around the U.S. And in most of these bases, she was flying T6s or BT-13s doing maintenance flights, things like that. She did come to Kingman. She was here for the summer of 1944. And when she left here in October of 44, she went to Marana Airfield, also here in Arizona. This photo was actually taken in Marana, and in fact, this photo was taken in November of 1944. This is the final photo of the WASPs. They're in front of a BT-13. We can tell it's a BT-13 because of the fixed antenna right here in the front. And this was taken just as they were decommissioned. The WASP program faced an enormous amount of criticism. What I'm going to try to do is not get real preachy because I don't like preachy people. But the fact of the matter is, history is history, whether we like it or we don't like it, and we have to accept all parts of it. These women faced a tremendous amount of misogyny. There was a lot of parts of the Army Air Force and the Navy that were not at all happy to have women encroaching in their territory. It was seen as one thing that they were building aircraft. It was another thing they were maintaining aircraft. But when they started flying airplanes, there was a lot of resentment. By mid-1944, it had become apparent that we could produce enough male pilots that there was an active effort made to dismantle the WASP program. And the WASPs, we've got some copies of letters they sent. They even sent a letter to Madam Kang Shek trying to go to China to fly for the Chinese Air Force. These women wanted to continue to fly for the Allied cause. Unfortunately, that was not to be. And in November of 1944, the WASP program was discontinued. Sadly, some of the last graduating class only got to fly 2 or 3 weeks of actual service before they were disbanded. So when the program was disbanded, the question is, what happened to Isabel? Well, Isabel had been a registered nurse before the war. And we actually have a letter where she wrote the Army, and she's like, okay, if I can't be a pilot in service of the country, I would like to be a flight nurse. And they wrote her a very cordial letter back telling her no, that she would have had to have been in the Army Nurse Corps for at least 6 months and have exemplary service and all these other sorts of things. I do not know what strings she pulled. I do not know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. What I do know is that here we have a picture of her in front of the School of Aviation Medicine. And this is her here in the very back, the tall gal. Right here in the middle is Isabel. And one of the other pictures and things that we have is her U.S. Army ID, dated from March 1945, of her in the Army Nurse Corps. And the other thing we have that I didn't bring with us is her flight logbook as a flight nurse. So whatever strings had to be pulled were pulled. She did get into the flight nurse program, and we actually have her logbook where she spent the rest of the war as a flight nurse on a C-47, moving critically injured patients from one part of the country to the other. One of the other neat things that we have with the WASPs is after the war, they went on and they formed the nucleus of what would become known as the 99s. The 99s are a big aviation group of women, and they would do different powder puff derbies and things like that. And one of the neat things we have is a wonderful photo of Isabel in front of her Comanche, taken sometime in the early 60s of her on one of these powder puff derbies. And then the other neat thing that we have that I'd like to share is a wonderful photo taken in the 80s, early 80s, of her with the remaining members of Class 44-3 at a WASP reunion. Now, these were all phenomenal women. All of them did not have the nice outcome that Isabel did. There was approximately 35 who were killed in service of their country, some in training, some on flights. Several of those actually happened here in Arizona. There was one story in southern Arizona with a T-6 that somehow or another the tail caught fire and the airplane crashed, and the WASP did not survive. And so when we talk about, when we get into World War II, we start talking about trend centers, and we see World War II is really where women started to take the real leap forward. It was a far greater leap, in my opinion, which is worth what you're paying for it, nothing, than the right to vote. Because here we saw women enter the workforce in whole new levels that nobody had previously thought possible. And these women were really, truly the pioneers of their generation. If you'd like more information about the WASPs, I highly recommend you can check our website. We have different things from time to time. There's also another website I'd like to give a shout out to, and it's CAF Rise Above WASP. And this is a neat organization, and they focus mostly on the WASPs and the Tuskegee Airmen. And they try to use history to show people how folks overcame adversity and different types of discrimination and how we can learn from history. And that's the whole idea why we teach history, is so that we can learn from history and we don't repeat it and don't make it continue to make the errors of the past. So I hope you've enjoyed our show today. Friendly reminder, we do still have raffle tickets available for our 1989 Jeep Wrangler. We will be at the 4th of July event. There's going to be a car show, I understand. We're going to be there selling tickets in person and some various other places. Again, check with our website. And as always, please hit the subscribe button and remember to follow us. Thank you so much.